Howdy. I came upon this debate on the modern day debate recently at DebateCon that's hosted by James Kuntz, and it was between David Wood, who's sitting on the right there. He is a Christian, and Aron Ra. And Aron Ra is an atheist. Apparently, he's a former pagan atheist, and David Wood is a former atheist. And so we have an adventurous group right there. They're discussing whether or not naturalism is true. Now, I'm going to give a really brief summary of what I saw in some of their arguments. But the bottom line is one thing that was a source of possible confusion, perhaps to some in the audience, was that they never really defined what their terms mean. So what is naturalism? It's saying that everything can be explained by the natural. All beings and events are natural. And if you look at philosophical naturalism, that's what that says. Methodological naturalism says that our natural world can fully be explained by science. Now, is that the case? Is that the case? Well, Aron tends to think that, yes, we can explain everything by science and naturalism. He believes that the world can be explained that way and that anything that goes beyond that is, quote, magic. And David would say that, no, everything can be explained with a combination of both the naturalistic explanation, because we, of course, see nature out there. We have a descriptive understanding of our world, but we also have a prescriptive understanding of our world, and that cannot be explained by naturalism. In other words, there is an is and an ought distinction. We know what is out there, and science does a great job of explaining what is in our environment. The fact that some humans are empathetic, the fact that some humans are selfish. Science does a good job and can explain that. We can say, yes, we can see what is, we can make observations, and that's totally explainable by science. However, what is not explainable by science is the ought, the moral ought. In fact, in this entire debate, there was a truth-seeking mission on both sides. Aron wants to know if naturalism is true. He talked a lot about truth and understanding the world around us. And David also is seeking truth. David came to Jesus many years ago. He had been living at one point with a Muslim, and the Muslim converted to Jesus too, Nabil Qureshi. And so it's a really fascinating story. You're going to want to go listen. Hey, Josh, great to see you, by the way. Red Pill Religion, good to see you. So let's go ahead and we're going to listen to part of this debate that I'm going to offer some commentary. But again, just to summarize my basic view and rebuttal of the idea of naturalism is a simple fact that naturalism cannot explain our moral prescriptions. Can't explain it. Can't explain the ought. We ought to tell the truth. We ought to be kind. We ought to be just. Can't explain that at all. So great to see you guys. Actually, do you guys want to join me for this chat? I can go ahead and send you a link. If you're interested, I will put the link into the copy. I'm going to go ahead and put the link right there here to get you guys, if any of you are interested, you can come on in here. Too early there. Okay, no problem. Okay, so anyway, so I'm going to come back and listen to a portion of this. So here we go.
How does materialism have cultural legacies?
Just to sum up here, he's basically saying that the Discovery Institute's entire mission is to eliminate materialism and beliefs in materialism and its cultural legacies in the world. And what is the legacies of materialism? Well, sadly, if we go back to, say, Nietzsche, who thought that he could eliminate God, and we go back to Karl Marx, we can see the legacies of materialism and those kind of beliefs because they played out in the USSR, in Cambodia, and in China in the past century, resulting in the slaughter, unnecessarily early demise of 120 million people. You might recall that it also included millions in Ukraine. So millions of people in Ukraine, unfortunately, were starved to death intentionally. That is a cultural legacy. So I'm going to come back here really quickly and see if either of you guys, wifey is still asleep. Otherwise, okay, it's 7 a.m. there. Oh, sorry, that's pretty early. I guess I can totally understand that. All right, so here we go.
Because materialism essentially means accepting that the material world exists, but not also believing in the immaterial, supernatural, magical, religion. By their arbitrarily imposed interpretation, if naturalism is true, then magic is not real and neither is God, since gods are made of magic. And these...
See his premise there? So it's the whole idea that gods are magic, God is magic. And of course, that's not at all what Christians believe. So this is really a straw manning of the Christian beliefs.
Religious fundamentalists think that whether you accept evident reality or whether you prefer to make believe something else instead, either way, they say that it's a matter of belief, of choosing to believe, which is not an option for all of us. It's not for me. But they say that beliefs are a matter of faith, all of them, and that faith is inherently cultural, that everything you believe is a matter of choice. And they say that it's a religion somehow, and that even a lack of religion is a religion, and that a lack of faith is faith, as if we can choose to believe whatever we want. And they don't understand that some of us don't believe, that we don't make believe, that some of us need a sufficient reason to compel belief, and that we don't want to be fooled into believing anything just because anything that isn't evidently true. So we're not going to believe impossible nonsense for no good reason just because you say so. Dominic Leroy went a bit further in an article to the Austin American Statesman, wherein he clarified that he's not just against philosophical naturalism, he's against methodological naturalism too, which is essentially the scientific method. Specifically, it is the premise that all postulations must be based on physical evidence and that all claims or hypotheses must be testable to see whether it's still supported or is potentially falsifiable, because if it's wrong, there should be some way to show that. These requirements both keep science limited to what is natural or real, because there's no way to test the supernatural or unreal. Well, if magic was real, there would be people like Spock, Gandalf, Obi-Wan, Hermione, and Doctor Strange who could demonstrate that reliably, at least well enough to show that there's a there there. But of course, in real life, no one can do that. No one ever has. Not one person has ever performed well enough to show any sort of success rate, despite however many thousands of faith healers, snake handlers, tongue speakers, prayer warriors, transcendental gurus, Ouija board mediums, psychic adepts, feng shui decorators, Reiki masters, treasure divinators, fortune tellers, spellcasters, and exorcists there are and have been all over the world since prehistoric times. We still can't show that there even is a supernatural at all.
It's relatively new in our society that people would actually believe that there are no gods or God. We have had those beliefs. Humanity has had those beliefs going back to the beginning of humanity. They've always wondered, as they looked outside, what is the source of this creation? A creation spells the need for a creator. And if you look outside and you realize that we've got a combination of time, space, and matter, and mind comes before matter, it makes a logical move that God is the source of everything we know. He's the unmoved mover. He's the contingency. So if you go back far enough, like you go back, what put me into the world? My parents. What put my parents? Their grandparents. You keep going back and you see that there's an uncaused cause. So you can get to God from a number of different ways. Ed Feser has done a really good job looking at that. Thomas Aquinas has done a really good job looking at those sort of things. And so there's a lot of sources that you can go. But the other thing that's very important is experiences. Now, in this debate, Aron is going to talk a little bit later about many of his experiences when he was a pagan and how he had been interacting and conjuring up a lot of stuff that later on he decided was just in his mind. But our world does operate with angels and demons. We do operate in a spiritual realm. There's a spiritual and a physical realm. And as he pointed out, there are exorcists. And I've listened to numerous exorcists tell stories about people whose eyes suddenly became like snakes, people who were able to walk on walls. They were suddenly able to speak in an ancient language that they did not know and had never learned before. They were able to say things about the exorcist that there's no way the person could possibly know. They were able to do very, very significant things with their strength, like little old lady who say 80 pounds, 90 pounds, able to lift a significant amount of weight. So there were a lot of things that these exorcists have said, and that's just one. There's also what Aron is going to talk about in a little while is the Catholic Church and other churches that have claimed miracles. So many churches have pointed to miracles, and the Catholic Church does a really good job of ensuring that there's no medical or natural explanation for the miracles that have occurred at Lourdes. Thousands of people have claimed miracles at Lourdes, but you have to go through an extremely rigorous process to be approved by the group at Lourdes as a miracle that is completely unexplained by medicine. It has to be something that lasts, for example, over a significant period of time. A cure that lasts, I should say. It has to be something, again, that every single explanation has been exhausted. So there's only 70 that they've approved in the Catholic Church at Lourdes. But there's significant miracles, like suddenly someone who's never been able to see can suddenly see. Someone who's completely paralyzed is able to walk. There's a lot of really interesting ones. So go and take a look at that if you have an open mind. I hope, Aron, you have an open mind. I really do. Because as David pointed out in this debate, you're kind of like Richard Dawkins and Michael Shermer and Matt Dillahunty and these other people that no matter what amount of evidence people provide you, you're just going to try to make an explanation of it and not listen to the evidence. So I would advise Aron and anybody else who's watching this, who's an atheist or agnostic, who doesn't think that we have enough evidence out there for God, take a look at the evidence for his miracles in this world. Take a look at the case of Barbara Comiskey Snyder. She had MS. She was debilitated in a bed, couldn't walk, couldn't talk. She was blinded. Her legs were pretty much atrophied. And suddenly she hears the words, "My child, get up and walk." She was able to get up and walk. And that happened back in the 80s, and she's still walking today. She married a pastor and lives a really wonderful life. So there's a lot of really good things out there. And yeah, so as Craig Reed is saying, there's tons of empirical evidence for a lot of supernatural stuff. Christian Carpenter says, "Good morning. I hope everyone's having a good Saturday." So hopefully you guys are having a good Saturday. So let's listen a little bit more.
Instead, we know from neuroscience and so on that souls don't exist.
Interesting, he says that souls don't exist, and we know from neuroscience, because I'm also pretty sure that Aron has probably heard about a phenomenon called near-death experiences. And a lot of people have these near-death experiences where they're out of their body. And there are many cases where people claim that they've been to a heaven-like existence or a hellish existence in these near-death experiences. Sometimes they see things in the room that they couldn't possibly see from the angle of a hospital bed, if they're in a hospital. There have been cases where a woman at one point, or it was a man or a woman, but was in a hospital, was able to see a shoe up on the roof of the hospital. So there's a lot of cases that people feel that they've been out of their bodies, which indicates that there is a possibility of a soul. And if you listen to any of the saints, I think the saints have some fantastic experiences. You can see cases like Padre Pio bilocating and appearing to pilots in World War II. He appeared in the sky to pilots in World War II. So go take a look at that. You can take a look at other cases like Sister Faustina. She has a number of experiences of encountering people who were in purgatory. And you might want to listen to that. And so you can listen to things like that, listen to the saints. It pays you to listen to what other people are saying in the world. Thousands of people claim miracles all around the world all the time. Sometimes they might seem like small miracles, like, hey, I found my keys. That's not a miracle, but sometimes people claim it would be. But then there are some significantly big miracles. So open your eyes to this stuff.
And most of the important fables in the Bible and the Quran and all other supposedly sacred scriptures are just fantasy folklore with a few embellishments.
Now, one of the things that Aron talks about a lot is he claims that faith is a belief without evidence. But we're told in the Bible to be faithful, but also to seek evidence. Test the spirits, test everything that you encounter. We were told also, one of the things that he does is he erects a lot of straw men to claim the Bible isn't true. Like he talks about bats aren't birds. He says that all the time. Well, the word for birds, the Hebrew word for birds in Leviticus 11, can be birds, but it could also mean flying creatures. It can even mean chicken. So you have to kind of look at this kind of stuff and not just completely write off the Bible because you think that a taxonomy that we have today it should apply to way back when. All right, let's go.
A few legends and such thrown in there with little or no connection to history or reality otherwise.
Many historians base their writing up of history on the geography, the culture, the context of the Bible. So that's just blatantly false.
And every one of the supposed saints and all the miracles that the Catholic Church claims to have confirmed are dubious at best, if not already debunked. And
I would challenge Aron Ra right now to go look at the 70 miracles that have been proved at Lourdes and report back.
And I say this as someone who was once a very spiritual person. I used to believe in reincarnation of spiritual life force. My actual religion, sincerely, for years, was essentially Jedi. I sincerely thought that there were people who really could do all that stuff. I really wanted to believe that there was some truth to the paranormal. I wanted to believe in UFOs, astral projections, mental telepathy, ESP, clairvoyance, spirit photography, telekinetic movement, full trance mediums, the Loch Ness Monster, and the theory of Atlantis. I wanted to believe all that was true, but I didn't want to make believe. I didn't want to rely on faith because I know how inherently auto-deceptive faith always is. I wanted to know what was true in each case.
See, I want to highlight that. He wanted to know what was true. Where do humans have this desire for purpose, meaning, and truth? Where does that come from? In a naturalistic world, there's no explanation. We're here by random chance. We're just a bunch of cosmic beings who are benefiting off random chance and no design. And it doesn't make any sense to even think that, to think that our design, it doesn't come with a designer, to think that our DNA, which is a sequence of four, what are those? I'm forgetting those letters all of a sudden. But anyway, so it is a sequence of 4 nucleotides. And there's a very specific code that the DNA is. To think that the DNA code doesn't have a coder seems ridiculous. We're like computers. Our systems are like computers. And to think that there's no designer seems ridiculous. But I digress.
And I wanted to show the truth of it. The problem is there just isn't any of that we can show to be true at all. So in this debate, I will hope that my interlocutor and I already both accept that the physical material nature exists. And if he has any legitimate evidence of a supernatural aspect in addition to that, such as someone certainly would have by now if there was any reality to that at all, then I'll be happy to see it. But I will not accept shifting of the burden of proof. I'll put that burden back where it belongs, nor will I attempt to prove a negative. I will not try to prove that there is not an undefined, indeterminable, non-physical, immaterial, supernatural alternative reality. Instead, I will leave it up to him to substantiate his belief that there is one, which, if he means to show that naturalism is not true, then that's what he would have to do anyway.
So I wanted to commend both Aron and David, before I forget to say this. I want to commend them for a very polite conversation. They treated each other very well through the entire conversation, through this entire back and forth. There were no insults. There was nothing like that. So I really enjoyed this debate, and I want to say thank you to James for putting it on. It's kind of a shame because then I saw another debate right after this one, which was between Andrew Wilson and Matt Dillahunty, and I reviewed that debate, which you can see. So it's completely different flavor of debate.
All right, thank you for your up to 16-minute opening. So we're going to kick it over to you, David, and the floor is yours for up to 16 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, James, for hosting this debate, and another 487 debates every single month for the past 5 years are officially the all-time king of debate hosting, and you always have a good crew there with you. And a special thanks to Aron Ra for agreeing to defend naturalism, although since he sounds like he doesn't take it very seriously as a position, I'm not sure where this is going to go. There are people who take naturalism seriously as a position, so I'm happy to respond to them. And I think it's a good idea to have to address a position like this. In debates like this, there's normally the theist defending some position and the atheist responding and challenging that position. And guess what? Sometimes atheists hold views too, and there are naturalists, and there are all kinds of various positions. And it's good to ask, hey, why do you believe in that position? But we'll push forward and see where things go. I don't know where things are going to go at this point, because again, Aron doesn't sound like he adopts this position seriously. Naturalism is, and Aron's right that there can be different definitions, but they're usually in the ballpark. If you're not talking about methodological naturalism, you're talking about metaphysical naturalism. It's roughly the claim that the natural world is what exists or what is real. It would be contrasted with supernaturalism. Supernaturalism would be the view that, yes, there's the natural world, but there's something else. That something else could be God or gods or spirits, souls, all kinds of things. And supernaturalism would usually include the idea that these things somehow interact with the natural world. So in a debate on whether naturalism is true, it doesn't make a lot of sense to not accept the burden of proof if the question is naturalism true? I'm actually tempted, given a topic like this, to play skeptic like some of the popular atheists play skeptic. I can just sit here and say, well, there's no evidence for naturalism. Show me that naturalism is true and so on. Prove to me that naturalism is true. You can play skeptic no matter what the position is. There's a famous video where Richard Dawkins was asked something like, if God did exist, what sort of evidence could God give you that would convince you? Dawkins says that when he was younger, he would have said God could just speak to him in an audible voice. If he heard a big booming voice, he'd say, oh, okay, yeah, I believe. And that would be enough. But he goes on to point out that upon further reflection, an audible voice wouldn't convince him. If he heard an audible voice, he would simply conclude that he was hallucinating. He then agrees with Peter Boghossian, who's having the discussion with him, that if God wrote a message in the stars, something like, believe in me, Richard Dawkins, he still wouldn't believe in God because he could blame powerful aliens for the message written in the stars. So,
see, that kind of what you call skepticism isn't skepticism at all. It's pure closed-mindedness. So you're not open to new information. And even if God did the most magical thing, if you want to call it magical, if you're Aron, but if God did something like he wrote his name in the sky, you don't believe. If you're in that kind of a camp, really, you got to question yourself. What has put you in this kind of a camp? Now, it's interesting because if you go to the book of Romans, Romans basically says that everyone's been given enough evidence that God exists. Some people suppress that evidence, and then God sends a powerful delusion to keep them feeling comfortable, apparently. Keep people thinking that their position is okay. Others have said things like, well, there's just enough obscurity in the world that the person who wants to believe God has evidence for God, but the person who really doesn't want to believe God, who wants to suppress God, has just enough obscurity that the person can seize on it. It was, what's his name? I'm forgetting the name of the person who said that. But anyway, so that's the kind of thing that is interesting out there. So let's listen.
Dawkins concluded that no matter what the evidence is, it can always be reinterpreted, and therefore that there's absolutely nothing God could do to convince him that he exists. The most interesting part is that Dawkins has spent a good amount of his career challenging theists to provide evidence for God's existence, even though at the end of the day, he admits that he's going to reject the evidence no matter what it is. Notice that anyone can do this. Any flat earther can say, I challenge you to prove to me that the earth is spherical. But just so you know, any evidence you give me, I'm going to automatically reject it. That doesn't sound very rational, and yet automatically rejecting the evidence is apparently a position held by several of the popular new atheists. So even if God appeared in front of us in glory, started blasting people with lightning bolts, atheists could easily explain that away. Maybe we're dreaming, maybe we're hallucinating, maybe we're in the Matrix, maybe powerful aliens are tricking us.
That's the kind of view that Neil deGrasse Tyson has. He seems to think that we're in some sort of a Matrix-like environment, or that's possible. That's what he thinks. It's possible that we could be in a Matrix-like environment, and there are these entities that are malevolent, and they're controlling us, and they're looking over us. That's where he's gone. If you don't believe in God, you'll believe in anything, G.K. Chesterton has said. So we have that kind of thing that's going on out there. So really consider yourself, if you're in here and you're thinking to yourself that God doesn't exist, and you hear about the evidence of miracles, you hear about all that kind of stuff, consider why you're at where you're at. Now, there's a really good book that I just read by Christine Watkins talking about the illumination of conscience. Some saints are pointing to this. They're saying, and they've been saying this for a couple hundred years, that at some point in the end times, God is going to illuminate our consciences all at once, and we're going to be able to see our lives in ways that he would see it. We'll be able to see our sins in the ways that he would see it. And during this time, many people would come to Christianity, but there will still be people like Aron Ra who would probably still reject Christianity. Hell, the doors to hell are locked from the inside, according to C.S. Lewis. And that's because Actually, it was also said that during this time with the illumination of conscience, Jesus would give people a choice to follow him or not to follow him. And sadly, some will still choose to reject him. They will choose an existence away from him. Now, what happens to those souls once they go into hell is the light that they have within them, the light of God, is gradually diminished, which is why if anyone's ever encountered a demonic spiritual being, you notice that it's very cold and very evil, pure darkness, no light within. Here we go.
In the Q&A from earlier, Matt asked why God doesn't just talk to us and tell us that Muhammad's a prophet. But think about it. If we suddenly heard a voice, believe in Muhammad, he's a true prophet. Does anyone think Matt Dillahunty would believe that and convert to Islam? I don't. I don't think Matt does either. So why bring that up? Again, this method can be used to reject anything. I could use this method to reject the existence of any atheist. I could issue a challenge to every atheist in the world. I could issue a challenge to Aron Ra. I could say, I challenge you to prove to me that you exist. In fact, I'll sweeten the pot. If Aron Ra can prove to me that he exists, I'll agree to become an atheist tonight. The caveat is that I'm going to use the method of people like Richard Dawkins. And whatever evidence he gives me, I'll say, well, maybe I'm hallucinating, maybe I'm in the Matrix, maybe powerful aliens are tricking me or something like that. If I were to use the methods that atheists use, there's no way it's impossible to prove much of anything to someone who's using these kinds of methods. Little side note, by the way, if the method you're using to reject theism could be used to reject any position, no matter how solid it may be, probably need a new methodology. But let's focus on naturalism. One of the most catastrophically self-undermining hypotheses ever. Some hypotheses are what I would call catastrophically self-undermining. What do I mean here? Well, we can see it with simple claims. If I say there is no truth, someone would quickly object. David, if you're saying there's no truth, then the statement you're making wouldn't be true either. The claim undermines itself. Let me give you a more relevant example. In Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy, Descartes famously imagines what it would be like if an all-powerful demon were constantly deceiving him. Descartes didn't believe this. He brings it up as part of a thought experiment in order to see if there's anything people can be absolutely certain about. An omnipotent deceiver were tricking me every moment of every day. Is there anything I could still know? And Descartes says, yes, there is. As long as I'm thinking, I can be certain that I exist. I think, therefore I am. It's impossible, even for an all-powerful deceiver, to deceive me about my own existence. And from there, Descartes tries to figure out more things that he can't possibly be wrong about. Again, Descartes didn't actually believe in an omnipotent deceiver, but suppose you meet someone who actually is, someone who actually does believe that. Suppose you meet someone who believes that he's being deceived every moment of every day by an omnipotent demon. This person's worldview should raise an obvious question, namely, if you really believe that you're constantly being deceived by an omnipotent demon, how can you trust your beliefs enough to even believe that? How can you trust your belief in an omnipotent deceiver if you can't trust your beliefs at all because you think you're constantly being deceived? Did the demon who's deceiving you about everything else suddenly give you accurate information about the fact that he's deceiving you all the time? In other words, if you take the omnipotent deceiver hypothesis seriously, you can't take it seriously. If I'm constantly being deceived by an omnipotent deceiver, then I can't trust my beliefs. But my belief that I'm constantly being deceived would be one of the beliefs I can't trust. Hence, the hypothesis would self-destruct.
One of the things that David says now, I think this is an interesting way to go. So basically what he's saying is we have this world that has natural and supernatural qualities. And if you're of the belief that the supernatural is impossible and you basically make up any excuse to deny the supernatural, then you're not, and you have to really look at yourself. Like, look at what you're doing. Look at your cognitive faculties. David asked the question a little bit later. He says, isn't Adam rational? Isn't Adam rational? Why do we seek rationality? Why do we seek truth, purpose, meaning? I mean, when you think about these sort of things, you have to think about why that is. Why do all humans seek that? Now, there have been studies that have shown, they've looked at the major world religions, and they've shown that everyone seeks this purpose. You seek a purpose in your life. And if you're a Christian, you seek a higher purpose in alignment with Jesus. Now, the religion of all religions that best explains our existence and best explains the type of sacrificial love that God requires of us is, of course, to look at the one religion that has a Lord who sacrificed himself. He said, greater love has cannot be found, but the one who will lay down his life for another. So Jesus' sacrificial life, the way he lived, the way he taught morality, he taught us truth, justice. He said that he is the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. He is the truth. Pontius Pilate famously asked, what is truth? See, he was living in a society where people were questioning what the truth is. And of course, that society is guided by the pagan views. Unfortunately, paganism is increasing in this world. And you see that a little bit later, Aron talks a lot about his own paganism and his paganism beliefs when he was a pagan. But it's in alignment with the occult. It's alignment with the demonic. It's very scary. The idea of Ouija boards and tarot cards and some of those things that Reiki, some of those things that Aron mentioned, that is the occult. That is in alignment again with the demonic. And getting into that is very dangerous. And many people who do get into that end up committing suicide. And why do they do that? Because that's what the demons want them to do. The demons want to claim at the very end of the day, they want to claim on your life. They want you to be with them in hell. That's their ultimate goal. Of course, God has other goals for us. Apparently, there's one angel assigned to each person. Priests and pastors have two angels. So you have one angel assigned to you through your life, your guardian angel. And then there's this idea of a counterpart, a demonic counterpart that Satan has assigned also. So a lot of times you feel that you want to do something, but your flesh is weak. Your flesh, unfortunately, might sometimes be going along with the ways of the natural world. And that's really unfortunate. So I think David's having a pretty good time here. So let's continue.
Take it seriously, you can't take it seriously. What I'm calling a catastrophically self-undermining hypothesis. But there's another catastrophically self-undermining hypothesis before us, and it's called naturalism. If you take naturalism seriously, you can't take it seriously. And I hope we're going to agree on that today. Because you can't treat the cognitive abilities that produce the belief as reliable when you're dealing with a hypothesis like naturalism. Naturalism is a hypothesis about all of reality. Naturalism were true, and you received your cognitive faculties, reason, perception, memory, and so on, from the naturalistic processes that are available to you, then you can't trust your cognitive faculties when you're dealing with a topic like naturalism. They weren't made for anything close to that. Let me explain why. Human beings have the ability to reason. We're using it right now, and we tend to trust our reasoning ability. We wouldn't have discussions like this if we thought that our cognitive faculties, the processes that produce our beliefs, were unreliable. But naturalists have a problem here because they can only explain things by appealing to natural objects, natural events, natural causes. Think about this for a moment. You have beliefs. Ultimately, according to naturalism, your beliefs must be the result of physical processes in your brain. Now, what's going on in here? Particles in motion, chemical reactions, neurons firing. It's all physical, governed by laws of nature, not by some sort of commitment to truth. So what really seems like careful reasoning to you is, in reality, straightforward, mechanical, mindless cause and effect, a fancy array of falling dominoes. Illusions aside, then, you arrive at your beliefs via a process that has absolutely nothing to do with whether those beliefs are true or false. Chemicals couldn't conceivably care less. If naturalism is true, and you believe in naturalism right now, you were causally determined by non-rational particles obeying non-rational laws of nature via a process set in motion long before you were born to believe in naturalism.
That is the crux of the argument. Some of the things that we value, as I mentioned earlier, but also this idea that we have human dignity and we're made in the image of God. When you believe in the supernatural, you believe that you are made in God's image, you realize that people have intrinsic value, and you realize that all souls become souls at conception. Your opinions on a lot of the ways that people treat each other in this world change dramatically. For example, your opinions on whether a mother should terminate the life of the baby within her, that changes dramatically when you have the belief that the baby is a soul and all souls have value and all souls are made in the image of God, including Aron's soul. We can only pray for him. So yeah, I'm trying to remember, there was a phrase that Craig said, something like the ontological status of, and he was talking about Plato. It had to do with Plato. And I'm trying to think of what it was. It was like the ontological status of concepts or something like that, but he had this little phrase. He says, most atheists, counter-apologetics are not relevant to the ontological status of God. Yeah, the point I frequently make is what you meant. Yeah, I think that's related to it. So basically it's looking at how you can explain certain concepts in our lives. If you believe in naturalism, you can't assign humans any different value than you assign animals or bugs or anything else that exists in this world. You really can't. And if you think that we are fully explained by just natural processes that are caused by random chance, the idea that you're a rational being or you should be a rational being doesn't make any sense because you have no grounding. That's the problem. The idea that Christianity says is we have an objective morality. We go with the idea of moral realism, which is basically saying we have objective morality to do what's right, and what's right falls in alignment with what's kind, just, fair, honest, and so on. We are always seeking and through our lives trying to get closer to the goalpost, and the goalpost doesn't shift with the winds of society. Unfortunately, there are people who have this idea that everything is relativistic, meaning that the morality depends on what people think of it. Human value depends on if people confer value. So that kind of morality, when you think that way, you find yourself justifying ending people's lives, these inconvenient, poor people, people who are older, people who have dementia. You justify that because you believe that you can confer value on other humans. It's really sad. And it's the same person who's cheering when they find out that, hey, it's going to be easier for me to kill the baby inside of me. Really sad, because you're not assigning value to the baby, and you believe that you assigning value to the baby matters rather than God having already assigned intrinsic value to all of us. So thankfully, the founders, our founding fathers here in the United States, they knew what that meant. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are equal. We have souls and we have value. And if you're trying to convince a person who's a moral relativist or a naturalist or a materialist of this, you won't be able to, because they believe that we're just here by chance. We're lucky beneficiaries of some sort of cosmic process that's unguided. And it's really sad. And so I want to say hi also to Captive Desk. He says, I don't care about opinions. I did everything Hugh Ross said to do that would have aliens, UFOs that are demons in disguise show up. Nothing. No, you wanted to get the demons to show up? Seriously? Oh my gosh. Captive Des, you don't know what you're asking for. You really don't know what you're asking for. That's very scary stuff. So yeah, Captive Desk is a male. So he says no babies are going to be inside me. So that's irrelevant. To no demons have shown up here. Well, the reason I point out the idea of the demonic, and I probably wouldn't, but I had an experience myself a long time ago. I think it was around 2011 or 2012. And I encountered a very dark spirit that I could see and I could feel. It was extremely cold that tried to suffocate me. And it was pure evil. Had I not had that encounter, maybe I wouldn't be as strong of a Christian as I am today. It actually pushed me back into the church, along with a few other factors. But that was one huge factor that pushed me back into the church. There is an existence of the demonic. And since I've had that experience, I've encountered numerous people who've also had similar experiences at one point or another in their life. So that was really unfortunate for me, and it changed me, and I've changed person since then, because I've come back in a very strong way to Christianity, and now I've even gone to my original Catholic faith. So I've done a 360. I started a Catholic, changed around, did a 180, and then came back, and so to where I originally started. So here we go. Let's continue here.
If naturalism is true and you believe in supernaturalism right now, you were causally determined by non-rational particles mindlessly obeying non-rational laws of nature via a process set in motion long before you were born to believe in supernaturalism. The particles and the laws of nature that causally determine what you believe right now couldn't conceivably care less whether your beliefs are true or false. A false belief is every bit as determined by non-rational particle interactions as a true belief.
These are excellent points, so I'll continue.
So if naturalism is true, what sense does it make to trust our reasoning ability or our beliefs or even our belief in naturalism? None whatsoever. But it gets worse. Here's a quote from Charles Darwin. Darwin is responding to William Graham, whose book is a defense of design in nature. Darwin writes to Graham, "You have expressed my inward conviction, though far more vividly and clearly than I could have done, that the universe is not the result of chance. But then with me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of a man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions in such a mind?" Darwin says that he shares Graham's conviction that the universe is not the result of chance. But he goes on to say that he can't trust his convictions because his mind has been developed from the mind of the lower animals. One could argue that reliable cognitive faculties would help organisms survive and reproduce and would therefore be selected in the struggle for survival, but this response would be unsuccessful for several reasons. First, even false beliefs can help organisms survive and reproduce. If you refuse to eat certain deadly berries because you believe they're poisonous, and I refuse to eat them because they've been cursed by an angry wizard, we both avoid the berries and we both survive. A false belief can often help you survive just as well as a true belief.
So the bottom line is when you talk about the survival of the fittest or survival of the most adaptable, he's identifying the problems with that as a pure belief system. Because one thing that we can agree on, I think that most people can agree on, except for the naturalists possibly, but the idea of human exceptionalism. I've talked to many biologists, and wherever you stand on evolution, and whether you're a evolutionary theist or anything like that, wherever you stand on that, one of the things that we have noticed in this world is that humans are exceptional. Humans can do things that the animals can't do. We can conceptualize. And the types of things that we can do are the types of things that are best explained outside of just the purely natural. Abstract concepts, all that kind of stuff. And so that's something that's pretty important. So, okay, Captive Death says, why are you doing this? Captive Death says, I have hours of summoning live streams on my channel looking for demons. Not I or anyone else saw anything. Anyone is free to review the videos. Show me the demon in them. Oh, Captive Desk, why are you doing this? You don't want, believe me, you don't not want to encounter them. There are ways that you can, and I'm not even going to tell you because I think it's better that you not encounter them. But there are ways that I've heard if you work through the occult, you could do that. And the occult is extraordinarily dangerous. So yeah, definitely do not go and try to summon demons. Okay, here we go.
Second, for purposes of selection, false beliefs can sometimes be more effective than true beliefs. You've got the hots for someone, but she's definitely out of your league and you're too shy to make a move, but you call up the astrology hotline and the psychic tells you that the position of the planet Venus is just right for love. Your false belief in astrology might give you the confidence you need to walk up to her and say, hey, what's your name? What's your sign? You might be impressed by your confidence. And she might love astrology, and you might.
I have to say something. He just reminded me of something. When I was in Florida State, I lived with these 3 female roommates, and we decided, in the olden days, you had answering machines. And so we decided to record a little song on our answering machine. And it was one that I made up, and this is how it goes. Hey, listen, cats, we'd love to chat, but we're out on the town. Hey, if no fear, we're drinking beer, and we'll be back around. Hey, what's your name and what's your sign? Are you a sorry case? Because if you are, you won't get far. Your message got erased. But if you're cool, don't be a fool and just now cut the line. You heard our raps. What's your flap? And don't forget your sign. Anyway, sorry, he reminded me of that.
Have 10 kids together. Your false belief can help you reproduce. Selection advantage. Third, the kinds of beliefs that help us survive and reproduce are usually grounded in simple observation and experience. My cave mate fag died eating those berries, so I won't eat them. But even the lower mammals are capable of learning by observation and experience. How mice learn to avoid traps. Human beings obviously have more developed abilities, but not enough to push their reliability far beyond the task they were selected to perform. At best, then, we might trust our faculties in matters that involve finding food, using a spear against an enemy, or doing something to attract a mate. Naturalism combined with natural selection, therefore, gives us almost no basis for trusting our reasoning ability when it comes to theology, epistemology, ethics, or metaphysics. As Patricia Churchland points out, given a naturalistic interpretation of evolutionary theory, Truth takes the hindmost in the struggle for survival. Churchland writes, looked at from an evolutionary point of view, principal function of nervous systems is to enable the organism to move appropriately. Boiled down to essentials, a nervous system enables the organism to succeed in the 4 F's: feeding, fleeing, fighting, and reproducing. Principal chore of nervous systems is to get the body parts where they should be in order that the organism may survive. Insofar as representations serve that function, representations are a good thing. Getting things right in space and time, therefore, is a crucially important factor for nervous systems, and there is often considerable evolutionary pressure deriving from considerations of speed. Improvements in sensory motor control confer an evolutionary advantage. Fancier style of representing is advantageous so long as it is geared to the organism's way of life and enhances the organism's chances of survival. Truth, whatever that is, definitely takes the hindmost.
See, this just doesn't make sense. The interesting thing, and I'll just point this out as we go through this debate, but the interesting thing in this debate is this idea that Aron, the question itself, is naturalism true? And it speaks to the value of truth. And it's not your truth. It's not my truth. Truth is what is in perfect conformity with reality. And truth is also Jesus. And so in the Bible, it talks to us much to speak the truth, seek the truth, speak truth to power. You see Jesus speaking truth to power in many cases, and the power of his time were among the Pharisees. So you see that kind of importance. One of the things that we have going on today in this world is there are a bunch of people protesting Hamas. They're supporters of Hamas. That's all they are. If they were just fellow Muslims protesting fellow Muslims, we would see protests coming out of many places against what happened in Yemen, against the 1.8 million Uyghurs that the Chinese have locked up, and against a number of other things that have happened to their fellow Muslims. We don't. Instead, we see people marching in the streets, even today in Europe, right now in London. People are marching in the streets as we speak, and they're protesting in alignment with chaos, with death, with the culture of death, with the culture that encourages death. There's a reason why the Egyptians won't unlock their border wall on Gaza, but I digress. But the point that I'm trying to make out of all of that is because we need to get out there. We need to speak the truth. We need to stand up for what's right. And there are many Jewish people right now who are suffering. There's many Palestinian people who are suffering too, including innocent children and babies. And that's a shame that the Hamas hasn't released the people who are hostages and opened the border. Opened their tunnels to the people if they want to help protect them. They haven't done anything. It's terrible. Anyway, I digress. So I just wanted to say, I hope you guys like this today. Please like, subscribe, and do come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Thank you.